All right, Norm, thank you so much for being with us here. I want to begin our interview reading you something in the Connecticut magazine that was written about you, describing you. Quote, "The P.T. Barnum of the courtroom, combative, whip-smart, fast on his feet. Pattis specializes in cases that make most people cringe. He's defended everyone from child murderers to rapists. He admits to being particularly drawn to homicide cases. If the allegation is heinous and the defendant is reviled, chances are pretty good that Pattis is involved. But even for Pattis, who says he's attracted to chaos, this past year has been a wild ride." Norm, professionally, personally, Dulos, Alex Jones, what has this past year been like, especially coming up on the one-year anniversary now of Jennifer's disappearance?
Wild ride summarizes it. I mean, this year in particular has been unusual. It began with intense public interest in a couple of my cases, and for the last 10 weeks I've been sequestered away at home, hoping not to get sick. So it's been one extreme to another.
Starting with the case surrounding Fotis Dulos, Michelle Troconis spoke out for the first time, saying, essentially in a statement in Spanish, which I'm still a little bit confused about, she said that it was a mistake to ever have trusted Fotis Dulos, essentially. What's your take on that? Why do you think she put out this statement?
You know, when Fotis died, I lost my client, and an estate was opened to wind up his affairs. The estate has made it clear that they represent what remains of Fotis's interest, and have instructed me not to speak or comment on the case at all. And I am obliged, as a matter of professional ethics, to honor them. So while I have opinions, I'm not at liberty to share them.
I totally get it, and I want to ask you those questions respectful of that fact. The night that Mr. Dulos died, just on a personal manner, I remember watching you at that press conference, and you were emotionally and visibly shaken, and you kept saying, "What did I miss? What did I miss?" You know, in a way, you kind of felt like this, in a way, his death was your fault. Right now, months later, Norm, what's something that keeps you up at night, bang in your head? What did you miss if you go back over the last 12 months?
Every trial lawyer has briefcases full of regrets. The judgments you make are always difficult. You make the best ones you can and hope they're right. I suppose the takeaway from this year has been I can protect a client from everyone but themselves. I wish I had seen better the distress he was under.
If you were to go back in a time machine, Norm, and go back to May 24th, 2019, the day that Jennifer disappeared, if you had to do this entire process over again, meeting Mr. Dulos, representing him, the press conferences, the court appearances, what would you do differently?
I don't know that I would do anything differently.
Even with the outcome?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Again, I'm not at liberty to discuss in any detail my relationship with Mr. Dulos or the case against him. But when I said the night of his death, I didn't see this coming. What did I miss? I'm still not sure that this was foreseeable, given everything that I know and knew at the time.
Just from an outsider's perspective looking in, is there any way in which you feel that you failed in this case?
My client's dead. Yes.
But you wouldn't go back and do it any differently?
Correct.
You understand my confusion with that?
No, I think what you're saying is I think what your confusion is, if I understand it, is if you failed, how could you have succeeded? And what I told you is I think a lawyer's job is to protect clients from the world, but you can't protect a client from themselves. I don't know what led Mr. Dulos to make the decision he did, and I never will know.
I totally get it, and I understand that there's probably frustration with that on your end, as it is for anyone who really followed this case, the unanswered questions. And in an effort to maybe answer them or not, I understand the situation you're in right now, but I know that the gag order is lifted, but so many people around this country have looked at that final letter written by him. I know you can't say much about it, if anything at all. But if you look at that day that he decided to take his own life, and all of us were watching that entire situation play out. Apparently, he was notified of an emergency bond hearing, and there were twists and turns with it, but he took one piece of paper to write down his final message. He mentioned you, his lawyer, in that paper, saying that you could explain what happened with, quote unquote, the trash bags on Albany Avenue. I know you probably can't say anything, but isn't there a burning desire, if there's something that you know that he says that you could explain. If you have some knowledge inside of you that could vindicate him, clear his name, give some insight, which you said that you want to fight to continue to do posthumously, isn't there a burning desire in you to share that information somehow?
Yes.
And what can you do about it now that you don't represent that estate? Like, explain that feeling of knowing something that can clear someone's name that you deeply cared about, and when are you going to share it? How is that information, the truth, going to come out?
I don't know that it ever does. I mean, the fact of the matter is that my relationship was with Mr. Dulos. He's died. His estate winds up his affairs. The lawyers who are managing that estate have seen fit to instruct me to stand down. They elected not to advance his interest by way of litigation. Whether they are pursuing intellectual property rights in his story is not something they've discussed with me. They've made it clear that, and the attorney-client privilege, and the privilege between his that pertains to his communications with me extends beyond his death. So my hands are tied. Though I have an interest in telling his story, I don't have the right to tell it, and it would be unseemly for me to seek to acquire that right. The estate controls his affairs, and it's the estate's decision about whether to ever make efforts to tell a better story or not.
I totally get it. Your team and you put hours, weeks, months into Mr. Dulos' case. Just curious, were you ever paid for any of that work you did?
I'm not going to comment on anything involving my relationship with Mr. Dulos.
Want to move on now. You know, some of the most famous and well-respected citizens of our country, Norm, were defense attorneys. Look at John Adams defending the British at the Boston Massacre. I mean, these people are notable figures. He even went on to become president. Is there something in these high-profile cases with major notoriety and spotlight surrounding them that draws you to them?
It's not the cases themselves. I think it's idiosyncratic factors arising from my own past. I was abandoned as a child, and by my father, who I didn't see for some 40 years. My mother took it hard, and I was sent to live with relatives where my presence was tolerated but not welcome. And so I think I am drawn to cases involving outsiders or people who are scorned, because I felt scorned where I was forced to sleep as a child. And when I see a person in that situation, I suppose I'm applying balm to old wounds of my own from childhood. I don't want to see that person abandoned. I know what it's like to cry alone at night. And I'm drawn to those kind of cases for reasons all of my own, reasons having to do with perhaps shortcomings of mine rather than any heroic attributes.
I want to dive into that if you don't mind. I'm fascinated by your story. You wrote something on your website, a blog post last year entitled, "How do you defend those people?" And you wrote, you know, the folks I stand beside are me. In some bizarre twist of fate, I repeat the abandonment cycle. You're talking about your father leaving you. You said, I defend hated and scorned people, and candidly, there's nowhere I'd rather be than by their side. Why? I'm guessing it had something to do with silent tears I wept with no one to hear them. My clients will not be alone. They need the defense a little boy never got. In a way, Norm, just reading your story and trying to put all these pieces together, it seems like you're trying to be the father for these clients, but instead of your father, not abandoning your clients and trying to correct that in some way, knowing what they're feeling if you do abandon them. Am I somewhat right on this?
You know, it sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, I mean, I'm a work in progress like everybody else. You know, I'll turn 65 in September, so I've had a long life to consider all my acts and omissions. And I've done psychoanalysis for 10 years, 4 mornings a week at 7 o'clock on the couch, asking, why in the hell am I doing what I'm doing for a living? There got to be easier things. And, I think in the end, I am drawn to chaos because chaos is what I know. I like representing the scorned. I know what it is to be scorned. I'm comfortable in that position. And there's a sporting aspect to it as well. It's the biggest challenge I can think of. Walking into a courtroom of people who are seething with hostility to your client inspires something like a competitive zeal in me. You want my client, you got to come through me to get him. Let's see what you got.
Mental health obviously seems really important in your own life. It's obviously made a difference, and you, like you said, you spent 4 mornings a week on the couch still to this day. It begs the question, if a lot of your clients took care of their mental health and they were on the couch 4 mornings a week, do you think that your business would be as booming as it is? Think back to Fotis Dulos or other people, other clients that you've represented. A lot of this, do you think, could have been prevented if they took care of their mental health the way that you did?
I don't know how well I've taken care of mine. You should read my hate mail. But, lawyers are taught in law school that clients bargain within the law's shadow, that a lawyer's skill is to be able to determine what the law will tolerate and advise clients on how to adjust their behavior to stay on the right side of the law. I think lawyers are not trained well. Most of what I see involves shadows, but they're shadows cast from deep wounds within the psyche of the people I represent. They've been harmed by others or they've harmed themselves. I'm not sure how many of these folks really can help what they've done. Sure, the discrete choices, they could have turned an on or an off switch at that moment, but the situations in which those choices, they find themselves, where those choices become available to them, just aren't situations most of us find themselves in. I've been angry enough to kill, but I've never killed another human being. I've thought about it. I've wanted to do so from time to time. But the idea of putting myself in a situation where my wish could become close to a fulfilled act had never even come close. But yet, I've represented any number of men and women who have killed. It's astonishing to me. So, I don't know whether their lives could have turned out differently. We hold them accountable for discrete choices they've made, but we never take account of the dark currents that make those choices look good or reasonable at the moment they occur. And that may be more than the criminal law can do.
How frustrating was it for you to be defending somebody for the past year, looking back at this 1-year anniversary, standing in front of the courthouses, in front of the media, and have certain members of the media, in your words, convict your client based in the court of public opinion? As we look at video of you walking in past the media, you're known to love the media and to flip things on reporters' heads. And in a way, Norm, it's fun to watch. But how frustrating was it to have to prove your case inside of a courtroom and also outside in front of a press gaggle?
I don't know if it was frustrating. It was a challenge that I loved and that I continue to love. I think it's easy to cast judgment, and we are drawn. I have a theory that we're drawn to criminal cases because we're all silent cowards. That the person who stands the loudest on the courthouse steps screaming, "You're guilty," is the person who's identifying with the accused and realizes how much they'd like to do what he did. And because or what they think he did, and because they've restrained themselves, they can't forgive the guy who actually got away with doing something that they can't permit themselves to do. So, calling out people's rage and desire for vengeance when they don't even know the fact is good sport, and I enjoy it, and I think it's healthy for the Republic.
Well, it's fun to watch. What's next for this case now that it's in a state? What can we expect? I know you can't talk about specifics, but can you just give a roadmap of maybe what's typical or what you expect to happen in the coming months?
I don't have any role in it at all. We represented briefly Mr. Dulos' sister. She's instructed us to withdraw her claims. So I have no involvement in it. I have no expectations.
I want to move on to a different topic here. Pretty simple question. Do you think that there's a difference between something being morally right and legally right?
Absolutely.
All right, so that brings me to the topic of Alex Jones. I understand the argument that saying something that offends an entire state of people or millions of people or whatever, I understand the argument that legally might be right. But talking about the conversation of morally right, you're a father, you're a Connecticut resident, you were around when the Sandy Hook tragedy happened. Explain to me the process or the difficulty or the internal struggle of separating the fact that it's legally right for Alex Jones, maybe, to say Sandy Hook was a hoax, or the internal moral struggle as a father and Connecticut resident that you might deal with when he calls something so sensitive a hoax.
Well, first let's back up for a moment. I recall where I was the day that I heard of the Sandy Hook shootings. I was waiting for a verdict in a murder case in Norwalk. It's one of those things that you'll never forget. And I know where I was when I heard that a friend had lost a stepdaughter, in the shooting. So there's never been any question in my mind that these events were real, and I believe they were real. I don't believe they were part of the deep state. I don't believe that they were part of a conspiracy or a Second Amendment proper, that crisis actors did it. There's absolutely no question in my mind about that. But I also know that I have good friends, intelligent lawyers around the country who believe that that 9/11 was a hoax. They believe that the government planned the Pentagon attack, the plane into the Pentagon. And in sitting down with these guys to attempt to reason with them, these are people with the same degrees I have, people whose intellects I respect. There's no getting around the fact that they believe this. And, I've given up trying to persuade them that they're wrong. And I've asked myself, what in the world makes these ideas possible? And I think what it is, again, this sense of a deep wound in the national psyche. I think we have a crisis of legitimacy in this country where we don't have shared, and we talk about how deeply divided we are in the electoral season. We don't have a common vision of the good. Cicero once said that a commonwealth, a res publica, a republic, a public thing, wasn't just any collection of human beings. It was a people bound together by common interest and a common conception of right. We lack that. And because we lack that, we lack a sense of legitimacy and a sense of trust. And some people believe that the world has gone so awry that events aren't what they appear. So, when I see, Alex Jones has for a while entertained the hoax conspiracy theory of Sandy Hook. He hasn't for a long time. The media won't cut him a break on it. It keeps repeating it as though he currently believes that. It's just not the case. Do I believe that Sandy Hook has been used as an occasion to seek to trim Second Amendment rights? Absolutely. I think many, and there's no question about that. Do I believe that Alex Jones to this day thinks it was a hoax? Absolutely not. Do I think he has the right to advance that theory? I certainly do. Now, what's interesting to me, Alex Jones has extreme views. I've been on with his show in Texas, InfoWars, with him. I've watched any number of hours of his productions. He's not some crank standing on the street corner of Main and Capitol screaming about little people with green ears. He's got hundreds of thousands of viewers who dial into him every day and listen to what he says. So the interesting question to me is not what Alex says, but why do people listen to him? Why do otherwise intelligent lawyers think 9/11 is a hoax? Why are we having a debate about whether the Chinese or the Americans did, the virus in Wuhan? Why is every single meaningful event in our public lives a matter of such intense and contested terrain? There's some center that's not holding, something missing. Now, I defend the right of anyone to advance any theory they want in the marketplace of ideas and would trust the market to correct the irrational. But the market sometimes fails, and irrational movements can lead to violence. And it may be that in this country we're on the cusp of violence. I sometimes wonder if we're close to something like civil war or dissolution because of the great violence in our opinions and our inability to agree on what's reasonable. I'd rather run the risk of that violence and chaos than I would have a central authority tell me what I can and can't think. So I said before, and I'll say again, Alex Jones and his opinions, or what you think of Alex Jones and his opinions, they don't scare me. What scares me, because I can always walk away, turn off the dial, or say, I'm not listening to that. What scares me is when the government's got a warrant and can tell me what I can and can't think. Because that government can come to my home with a warrant and say, see that book? You can't read it. It's prohibited. And the book that I can't read suddenly is the book I have to read, and I'll be damned if I sit still and let the government tell me what I can and cannot do.
You say that you do things a little bit differently than some lawyers in this state and in this country. You mentioned that you get hate mail from this woman in California every year, a card.
Well, I used to. I think she died. I think she enjoyed the fate she wished on me.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. She sends this hate mail to you, wishing, what was it, death upon your family or something like that. I mean, and you go on, correct me if I'm wrong, to say you take those as badges of honor. You totally flip it on its head and you say something completely different than most people would say, defending their family and being angry about it. You say, no, they're badges of honor. Explain that thought process. Where does that come from?
Probably somewhere in the deep, dark recesses of third grade or fourth grade. I mean, I'm not saying it's the most mature response in the world, but, let's face it, somebody I never met. I refuse to pay the rent for the space I occupy in someone else's head. So this is a woman I've never met in a state that I hadn't traveled too much, and at least at that point in my life, who took it upon herself to listen to what I had to say, took it to heart, and then had to find me and decided every year on the anniversary of something or other to write me a letter wishing me death, destruction, this, that, and everything else. What power she's given me. And for what reason, I can't begin to fathom. So, I mean, I'm not afraid of hatred. I'm not afraid of the haters. We've had death threats before. I've always said before, the person who threatens to kill you isn't the one you have to worry about. It's the one who never says anything. And then there's no point in worrying about him because he'll just get there when he gets there and then you're done. So what's the worry? That's my attitude.
I want to go back to something else you said. In that Connecticut Magazine article, you were quoted saying, "What in these cases the families are looking for is someone to recognize the humanity of their loved ones and to stand beside them when the world hates them. If I can be that voice to say that I understand, or the voice that says to the state, not so fast, or the voice that says to the judge, consider this," that's pretty cool. Norm, to me, it almost sounds like your legal work is more of a ministry to you. When did it make that transformation?
A ministry. Wow. Well, I certainly don't view myself as a minister. I couldn't save a soul if I saw the soul. And I don't know what the road to redemption is. None of us get out of here alive. I simply know how I react to the world around me. So, for example, there was a case not long ago, and I saw that my wife turns on the television in the morning to see the traffic and weather, at least when we used to travel. So I'd know what I was looking at. And one day there was a report of a young man who had thrown his 7-month-old child off the bridge in Middletown into the Connecticut River and then went in after him and survived the fall. And I thought, boy, I'd love to get that case. And lo and behold, 2 days later, his mother called and I defended him at trial. His name was Tony Moreno. I tried to persuade the jury that it was not murder, but that it was something less than murder, perhaps manslaughter. The jury rejected that defense. But I knew where I wanted to be in that case, and I knew that I did not want Mr. Moreno to be alone. And I knew that he had a story to tell, and it was my privilege to tell it. So I don't know if that's a ministry. I don't know, but I also know, in that, getting my key card and my car keyed in that courthouse parking lot, and a lot of comments in the hall, and the way people would look, when you'd walk into a courtroom. And I thought, my God, let he who has sinned without sin cast the first stone. What's the matter with these people? They're so filled with hatred. This young man has destroyed the life of his child and his own. Why? Why did that happen? Why are we so quick to hate? And so I'd rather stand next to him than with those accusing him.
Even if you're the only one doing so. I mean, I want to dissect that. Look at this case of Tony Moreno, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what you're saying is that, in your opinion, many people, if not all, saw that story, saw the headline that was run on the news, turned their backs against him, thinking he threw his baby off the bridge, and you knew that everyone was going to turn their backs on this guy, and he couldn't be up there alone, and you wanted to be the one person to stand beside him and be an activist or defend him. Same with Fotis Dulos. You look at the entire country, and the court of public opinion, in your words, convicted him of killing his wife and disposing of her body. You said, if anyone's going to turn their back on this guy, I want to be the one person who's there for him. And is that why you were so emotional the night that he passed away, because of that mindset?
Maybe. I mean, I think that, when in the Moreno case, it was odd. When I grew up in Detroit, at least I went to junior high and high school. It's an open question whether I've ever grown up. And in junior high, my mother arranged for me to be part of the Big Brothers program. And my big brother was a man named Herbert Steiger. And he would, every other weekend, take me somewhere, and often to stay with his family. And he would say, I'll meet you at your house at 5 p.m. Now, we lived amid rough circumstances. My mother was living with a man who was quite violent at the time. On one occasion, he'd beaten somebody in the neighborhood up with a baseball bat. They were threatening to come and get him. So he handed me one gun and put me in the back of the house. And he stood in the front of the house with another gun. And he said, shoot anybody that comes in here. And I was 13. And I'm thinking, man, I hope they come out front and shoot him. But, and so that was tense and that was scary. And I was not happy to be living in those circumstances. But I knew that Friday at 5 o'clock, Mr. Steiger was going to pick me up, and I'd sit in his car, and I would drive to a house where I would be served dinner with his family, and we would sit down and eat together and watch a movie. And I'd stay overnight, and the next day we might go to a baseball game or something. And during jury selection in the Moreno trial, I realized he died. Mr. Steiger died. And I almost never asked for a favor from the court, but I asked the judge for permission to attend his memorial, which was scheduled during jury selection, and it was given. And so I traveled to Detroit, and I realized just how defining Mr. Steiger's commitment was to me. That little bit that he gave every other weekend to a kid that was looking for stability created an island for me in a sea of chaos. And I guess I want to be that for the people I represent. And, I'm not claiming that I got, tablets off the mountain or that God talks to me or anything like that. Everybody acquires a sense of vocation wherever they can. And if that's how I got mine, those are the cards that I've been dealt, and I'm going to play them.
Looking back at the last 12 months, in particular the case surrounding Mr. Dulos, how did that case change you as a lawyer, and how did that case impact you personally?
I don't know that it changed me any as a lawyer. Worked hard on it. I'm very frustrated that I didn't get a decision from the Connecticut Supreme Court on the gag order. That it was very intellectually and emotionally challenging. Physically, these cases always take a lot out of you, so it's important to stay fit and fight them. Personally, there is an enormous sense of loss. I saw a picture of Fotis the other day. I guess we're on the cusp of the anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance. And there was a photograph of he and I in some courtroom, and I miss him. I miss being able to talk to him, and I wish I could have kept him alive.
So you saying that means that you're really feeling this on your shoulders, the fact that he's not?
Yes.
Reading that article in which you really opened up like you are now, there's a quote. It says, in his motion, Pattis referred to the Joan of Arc and an outlaw named Henry Plummer as examples of people in history who were tried posthumously and acquitted. However, neither is a Connecticut resident, and what Pattis wants to attempt by all accounts has never, ever occurred in this state before. Joan of Arc, Henry Plummer, you came up with this hours after Mr. Dulos passed away. Where does that come from? You don't learn that in a classroom, no?
I don't know. Reading is my drug. You're in one of the rooms of our house where we own a bookstore. Life is an adventure. People who write about the adventures they've lived, they've had, or they've imagined, or they wish they could have, give us pebbles that we can gather and store away for when we need to throw them at the next monster we confront around the corner. As far as I was concerned, the state of Connecticut was the monster in the case of Fotis Dulos, and I was there to throw every pebble that I could.
You threw a lot of pebbles. I want to move to a different subject, and that would be the fact of why we're Skyping right now, COVID-19.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the 50s Lounge and Bar in New Haven and your fight against the governor's orders with constitutionality when it comes to forcing businesses to shut down and close up.
So, plagues are a common feature in our life. And so when the COVID-19 crisis first came upon us, I read Daniel Defoe's book, Year of the Plague, about the plague in London in 1665. And at that point, as many as 7,000 Londoners died each week, and the city lost 20% of its population in the course of a year. But yet the city moved on, and people found a way to continue to eat, to continue to engage in commerce, and to continue to engage in the ordinary tasks of daily life. 24 years after the plague, John Locke wrote the second treatise of government, in which he talked about government by consent. And nowhere in which I think informed some of the ideas of our founders at the time of the founding of this republic. And we like to say that we're governed by the rule of law. and that we're governed by consent. Nowhere in the Constitution that I have, or that I have read, or that I've devoted my adult lifetime to studying, do I see a public health exception to the Bill of Rights. In 1918, in 1919, we had the Spanish flu. I guess you can't call it that now. You'd be accused of ethnic insensitivity. We had a flu that took 650,000 American lives, but we successfully prosecuted the First World War while fighting that flu. Life goes on. There is no public health exception to the Bill of Rights. And for Ned Lamont or any other governor to declare that in the opinion of his public health officials, we need to shut the state down to keep every last one of us alive for as long as possible is, in my view, unconstitutional. I understand the imperative to take care, and both my wife and I socially distance. We've got gloves, we've got masks, I don't know when I'll be returning to court or work, or if I will be, candidly. But I do know this much, that there are people out there who don't have the luxury I do, and they've got to work, they've got to survive. And at some point, the remedy is going to be it will be worse than the disease. We've survived plagues, pandemics, public health crises from time immemorial. We'll survive this one as well. There's nothing in the federal Constitution that gives Governor Lamont the power to do what he wants. There's the only time the United States Supreme Court ruled decisively on a public health measure was in 1905 with respect to the smallpox vaccination. And that was a decision supported by scientific consensus and expert opinion about the efficacy of the vaccine. There is no scientific consensus about the efficacy of a wholesale quarantine or shutting an economy down indefinitely to prevent lives at the margin. Many of your listeners and viewers have already survived an exposure to COVID-19. Many of us will get it and survive. Some of us will get it and die. Those of us who are most vulnerable to death are those of us who are closer to death anyhow. My mother died at 86 in a nursing home in Detroit during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was about 5 weeks ago. I didn't ask the nursing home administrators if she had COVID-19 because I don't particularly care. She was 86 years old and in poor health when this began. No one lives forever. So I think what Socrates once put it, the point is not to live, but to live well. As the Patriots said, as they say on the New Hampshire license plates, let's live free or die. When did we become a people so addicted to life at all costs that we're willing to accept restrictions on our liberty to the degree that we now appear to? I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with it. I'd rather fight.
Well, you're a fighter, no doubt. I have just a couple more minutes here, and I want to end with some questions that I'm just curious about. You said in that article, you go, I'm 64 years old, I have a ponytail, I have issues with authority. Norm, what's the deal with the ponytail, and why are you wearing sneakers with your suits when you go to the courtroom? There's this inner rebellion, it seems like, inside of you. Where does that come from, and why is it still around?
Well, the hair, it's funny. I grew a COVID-19 beard. I got back from Texas March 13th, and I started to grow it. And then this week, for a couple days, I had a fever, and I called my doctor, and he said, well, I don't know, maybe I should get a test. And I said, well, if I got a test, what would it tell us? What would it tell me? You're going to tell me if I stay home and recover, and if you get worse, come in. So the test won't tell me anything. But I thought, if I'm going to have to wear a mask, I better shave. So I shaved the beard off. You almost got to see the Santa beard, the whole white thing. But when I was shaving it, I thought maybe I should grab the hair too. But I don't know. I've just had it so long. When I first grew it, it was because it was easier and less expensive than going to the shop all the time. Just throw a rubber band about it. Now, I don't know why I have it. Why don't you? I guess let me ask you the question. Why don't you have one?
Because I'll tell you why, because I wouldn't look nearly as good as you with one.
No, keep talking. Yeah, exactly. And as to the tennis shoes, I guess I don't know. I guess I have to wear suits because I go to court, and maybe that's just asinine. Maybe it's juvenile. The shoes are comfortable, though. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and you run past the press pretty nicely too sometimes. A couple of things, the state and the country might have some misconceptions about some of your clients. You know these individuals personally, you talk with them personally, their deepest, darkest secrets sometimes. And I think you would agree with me when I say that the state and the country probably have some misconceptions about some of the people that you represent, and you do your best maybe to clear those up. I think a lot of people have been seeing you in the media when it comes to the case surrounding Mr. Dulos, Alex Jones, you name it. And a lot of our viewers right now might have some misconceptions about you. Not that you care, but what misconceptions about you would you like to clear up or maybe set the record straight on? Or what do you think people are getting wrong about Norm Pattis?
I don't know because, when I don't read, I see, get the hate mail or the nasty comments and emails and whatnot, and I generally don't listen to them. I have a wife that I love and I'm close to, 3 children that I love and I'm close to and I'm very proud of. We've got animals here that I care for. I have a very full life, so I'm not really worried about clearing up misconceptions that others have. I guess the question I'd have for them is, why bother with the conception at all? If you need me, call me. If you don't like my client, that's fine. If you're going to be on a jury, all I want you to do is listen. Otherwise, just leave me alone. I don't want anything from you.
You mentioned your family, your wife, your kids. You read 2 to 4 books a week, obviously, by your background behind you. You love to run. When is enough enough? When are you going to stop doing this?
That's a really good question. Here, the most amazing thing about the COVID pandemic is how much I've enjoyed a slower pace. I walk the dog every morning for a couple hours and come home and have breakfast, read for a while, take a little work, get a little more exercise in the afternoon, settle in and watch something with my wife in the evening. I'm thinking, boy, oh boy, I've been missing a lot over the years. So I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what happens next. But yet the phone continues to ring. I may be traveling to California next week to speak to somebody about another case that we'll be talking about, I suppose, sometime soon. I don't know how much. How much life is enough? Both my parents lived to 86. They were 3-pack-a-day smokers, each of them, for 70-some years. I've never smoked. So I'm thinking, with any luck, I've got another 15, 20 good years in me, and maybe I'll just keep doing this. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Well,
it seems like you're having fun. I want to end on one thing. We mentioned misconceptions. A lot of people out there have misconceptions about your clients. I think a lot of people out there might have misconceptions about who Norm Pattis really is. Last question. How do you want to be remembered by the people that actually do know you?
I don't really worry about that. They know me, so they'll. I think that I'm not putting on an act. I am who I am. I don't have dark secrets to hide. Remember me any way you want. I guess when and if I'm gone, I'll be gone, so it won't matter to me. But ask yourself the following questions. Why is it important to you that I do what I do? What is it about me that interests you? That's a question that should be more interesting to your viewers and my friends, because I didn't ask for the attention you've given me. You called me for the interview. I didn't call you.
It's a very good Norm Pattis answer. Norm, we appreciate it, and you are welcome back here anytime, especially as more cases come your way. We appreciate it, Norm. Thanks.
Be well. Thanks. Bye.